Right, I haven't got an intro this week because we've been hard at it. We are right on the back of the stadium location announcement. So we've got with us Carly from Fans Forum, Duncan from Must. Duncan, let's start with you. How expected was this given the recent announcement, and what have you made of it today?
Well, I mean, the only thing we probably really learned today was potentially the orientation of the stadium, didn't we, on some images, because obviously once the purchase of the land was announced, what was that, about a week or so ago, we knew that was where the location was going to be. So it's not on the Freightliner land. That might have been a serious consideration, but they were keeping their options open, I guess. And it's part of avoiding being kind of held to ransom on the land purchase, I imagine. I mean, I've heard this was always their primary preferred location, but they didn't want to reveal that. I don't know whether that's true or not.
What are the advantages of it then? Because they're saying it's 350 meters away. If you look at, I think I've got this right from this. This is Google Earth images. I think you can see is a bit more than a goal kick. It feels slightly further. I think this is where just to the side of where I went cycling during lockdown, and it's a bit further away, isn't it?
It's definitely further away because obviously it's the other side of the Bridgewater Canal, and the previous one would really have been the car parking area going up past around the ticket office as it currently is around that area, wasn't it? So it's a little bit further away. It changes things a bit, I suppose. You know, St Matt Busby Way is probably not going to be it isn't going to be the primary route to the stadium anymore. And I guess it probably opens up some transport options for them, you know, makes it easier. I think they're talking about park and ride and things like that, aren't they? One of the comments I've heard is that there's going to be very little car parking, but you know, that's probably a good thing, particularly local residents like us, Carly even more so. If you're going to have an extra 25,000 supporters turning up, the impact on traffic congestion of having that extra incremental number of supporters could be massive if they were coming out in cars. So I guess that should be something that'll be welcomed by local residents. But yeah, other than that, I don't think it changes that much in terms of the stadium.
So, are there any fresh positives or negatives, Duncan, as far as you're concerned today?
Not today, really. No, I mean, I think what it signals really is that, you know, another step down the road that we definitely are going for new build, and that it's more compelling that decision has been made. You know, the land purchase is a big commitment, assuming that that is a real commitment. You know, maybe a contract that hasn't been signed yet, it's been agreed, I don't know. No money's changed hands, but everything signals that, you know, they're not going to change their mind on this, and unless something significant happens, you know, in planning or in change of ownership, then we're going for new build. And I think for me, that's why we're getting into the nitty gritty now of what really matters to supporters, aside from that big decision, which I think we had limited ability to influence. There was no referendum on the stadium. A lot of fans sort of feel like there should be. But I think, you know, £2 billion plus project, is somebody sitting in Monaco or Florida or wherever they are that concerned about fan sentiment to change their mind on a big project like that. I think realistically that was, you know, a forlorn hope, and our best option is to use our resources and our energy at getting the best out of the decision that's been made. And I think a lot of us, me included, tend to focus on the potential negatives and the potential fears of what could go wrong. But there obviously are potential positives as well, you know, and just to start on that positive, if you like, you know, over many years being involved in EMUSA before Must, a lot of the things that we wanted to see change at the club, particularly for match game fans, were really difficult because everyone's stuck in their seats, and, you know, you couldn't rearrange seating, you couldn't create the sort of fan zones, although of course we have done to an extent now in the Stretford end. But, you know, there is the opportunity with the blank slate of a new stadium that you could do something much bigger and better and create, you know, a real sort of yellow wall style end to the stadium or both ends of the stadium, steep stands, standing sections, cheap tickets. Those are all things that we'd like to see create the atmosphere, and you've got to aim for that, however realistic you think that's going to be. And I think, there are good arguments for it. They can make revenue in other parts of the stadium. They want an atmospheric stadium. Why wouldn't they? So I think it's about trying to really make the compelling arguments on those things and say there's a trade-off here between the revenue you get versus the commitment you get from supporters, what it does to a fan in terms of their identity, feeling like they're a fan and not a customer. And they're all arguments that we've been building over many years, but obviously having to rehearse a lot of them again with new management and new owners. But, I feel like we're making some progress on that. The fears, I don't know if you want to go into the sort of concerns we've got now, or shall I take a break?
Let's save it till we bring. Yeah, because I have a graphic of what you've asked for that I'll bring in later on. Just in the meantime, been reading this piece. A lot of the stuff you're talking about there, Duncan, it really is about long-termism versus short-termism as well. And you mentioned about relocating people, but that's been a controversial issue the last year or two, just within the current setup as well. So this article I've been reading talks about forced relocations, talks about a new stadium being built for tourists, not locals, especially not local kids who are disappearing from the stands, which we can all see with our own eyes year after year. The author of that article is Carly Lies, who's with us now anyway. So what do you want to say about this thing that's in Mancunian Matters that you've published today?
So the thing that I've published today is a breakdown of the season ticket data from 2025 based on postcode location. So there was a study that was done, some people might remember it, in 2001 that was called Do You Come From Manchester? And it was by an academic called Adam Brown, who was a United fan who ended up being involved in setting up FC United. And he did a postcode analysis based on data from City and United, comparing how many season ticket holders from each club there were in each part of Manchester, concluding, obviously, that Manchester was red. He found that there were more season ticket holders in Manchester who were United fans than City fans, and it's been, brought up loads of times since in fanzine articles and sort of general conversations that people have as sort of evidence that Manchester is red. So I've done an updated version. I got the data from the ticket office, who were really supportive in letting me have a look at the postcode data for all 46,800 season ticket holders. And what we found from that when I've analysed the data is that there's been a huge drop in the number of season ticket holders in Manchester-based postcodes since 2001, which I don't think is going to be a particularly big surprise to anyone that's paid any attention to what's been going on at Old Trafford fan-wise for the last 24 years. So in 2001, 29% of season ticket holders came from Manchester-based postcodes. And when I say Manchester-based postcodes, I mean just those postcodes. So it doesn't include the WA postcodes of people that are in, it's not all of Greater Manchester, it's not people that are in
Hale and Warrington.
Hale and Altrincham, not people that are in Ashton, not people that are in the top ends of Bury and Salford and Stockport, literally just Manchester postcodes. M1 to, I think M90 is technically the airport, so M1 to M50. And what it's found is that in every postcode area, the number or the proportion of season ticket holders has dropped since 2001. The only places where it's gone up are the areas where there have been big population increases. So M1 to M4, because obviously city centre living has boomed and the populations of those areas has grown by about 15,000 in each area, and M50, which is Salford Quays, which didn't even exist when it was first created in 2001. So there's been a drop in all postcode areas. Interestingly, in most postcode areas, it's not an absolute drop, it's a proportion drop. Since 2007, there have been 19,000 additional season tickets that have come available at Old Trafford. So you would think that the base numbers in most places would go up. So it's the proportions in most that have gone down. So you may have had, 300 season ticket holders in 2001, and now there are 340 season ticket holders. But because there are an extra 19,000 tickets, the actual percentages is that it's dropped as a proportion of the overall. In M32, which is the Stretford-based postcode, the absolute numbers have actually gone down, which was a shock. So it's gone from 390 in 2001 to 240 in 2025, even though there have been an extra 19,000 season tickets that have come available. People from Stretford in particular have not been the ones that have benefited from those new season tickets becoming available. There's been a huge drop off. It found that overall in Greater Manchester as well, in all of what they call the peripheral postcode areas in Oldham and Bury and Bolton and Stockport and Hale and Altrincham, there's also been a decrease. But also across the whole northwest, so across Greater Manchester, Cheshire, Cumbria, Lancashire and Merseyside, it's dropped to, I think,
28% from 48.
Yeah.
So it was almost half of the season tickets before were from the northwest of England, and now it's just over a quarter.
Yeah. So there's been a huge decrease in the regional area, and the original study wanted to test the stereotype, as they called it, that Manchester United were a national and international fan base rather than a local and regional one. And at the time they found that wasn't the case, but it is now very much at that tipping point where 52% are still from the northwest, and 48% are from the rest of the UK and abroad. So we're nearly at that tipping point now. And that data was from 2025. It may have changed even now going into the next season, but we're nearly approaching that 50-50 northwest versus rest of the country and rest of the world. So it's interesting that, you know, we're having these conversations about the stadium. Who is the stadium going to be for? Is it tourists? Is it locals? Who counts as local? And all of those debates. But we can see already, even before the new stadium, United season ticket holder base has moved much more towards that sort of national focus and international focus and away from fans. So that's already happening. This isn't something that is at risk of happening with a new stadium. It's already the case that Old Trafford is more and more not for local people and is more for an international and national fan base. Now, this isn't me saying that, you know, fans from outside of Manchester don't deserve to be able to come to Old Trafford. I'm not from Manchester. I grew up in Wales. I came with a Welsh supporters branch until I was 18. There are so many fans from all over the country and all over the world who absolutely deserve to be at Old Trafford. But football clubs, I don't think anyone would disagree, have always been, were founded as community-based institutions. Don't think anyone would disagree with the idea that football clubs should have a positive impact on the community around them and should be accessible for the people that live near those football stadiums, just in the same way any other facility, any sort of facility around should be accessible to the people, you know, that live in the immediate vicinity, let alone something like a football club, which has been set up with explicitly, you know, social and community-based aims. But it seems like we're moving away from that. And the new stadium, I believe, will be a continuation of that process. But as Duncan said, we need to have a look at things through a positive lens because, like it or not, we're stuck with this stadium now. It's happening. Like, we've already sort of, I think the horse has bolted on the whole, you know, try and stop the new stadium thing. What Britain's richest man wants, Britain's richest man gets. So I think now we need to look at how do we make sure that local fans, Manchester-based, hyper-local fans in the immediate area have the opportunity to input onto the stadium plans. And what's been interesting today is that there wasn't much about the stadium today. Today was all about the Mayoral Development Corporation and the Trafford Council and the sort of public sector actors who are doing the regeneration project. So that's been the big focus today. And we found out that they're launching their consultation phase. They've published the Warside Master Plan and they're now going into the consultation phase. United haven't gone into a consultation phase yet. So this is an opportunity to look at what Trafford are doing and what the local authorities are doing to try and engage people and push to make sure that United goes even further and even deeper for fans.
To that then, because in lieu of actual proper consultation, you've done your own, Mustard's done its own, right? So these are the 6 areas that came back from your survey of more than 3,000 people, about 3,200 people, Dunk, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's the number who responded. The number who were asked to respond is much bigger, but, you know, more than 100,000 would have received that survey. But, you know, I think there is a little bit of fatigue on this, and not least because people think a lot of decisions are being made or they've previously answered it in other surveys. And obviously the club have done some surveys, but probably not asked questions in the same way we have and about some of the issues we have. Certainly the club didn't include in their big survey that they did anything about how the stadium was going to be paid for, which I think is a really important issue because it has an impact on lots of other things, including things like ticket pricing, personal seat licenses, are all things that will be affected by whether you go for a debt or equity, other forms of funding, essentially. This is one initial survey, and I think that we see it that we want this to be a real continuous process. And because we're getting into the meat of things, or we're about to, if this decision has been made, what we want to make sure is that we're not doing consultation, or the club aren't doing consultation after decisions have been made. And I think it's really difficult for people to give views on things without seeing what is being proposed. So I think it's up to the club to make a proposal for something, but not a firm decision on it, and then to allow the consultation on that proposal so that fans can feedback on what is being proposed and then shape that into optimizing it to be a better proposal in the end that goes forward. And what we want to see the club do, obviously the club have got much more resources than us, and they've got access directly to, the season ticket holders and the members' databases. But what we want to see is a mixture of consultation forms, some of them club-led, some of them independent, perhaps by, paid agencies, and some of them fan-led, and obviously Must and other groups no doubt will do that. And that's the role that we certainly want to fulfill, because we'll ask questions in a different way, I've no doubt. And I would hope that supporters will recognise that an organisation that's a fan-led organisation is trying to get the best deal for supporters, is not going to try and bias a survey. We've got a professional with 30 years of experience in research who leads it, and often when we want to phrase questions in certain ways, he won't allow it because he feels that we're trying to bias opinion. And that's the way we've got to do it, because if you're going to have any credibility with your results, and in the end, the audience is the decision makers at the club. And so there's no point in us creating surveys that come out with results that we want to see or a certain group of fans want to see, because that's not going to convince anyone. So I think it's about trying to make the club think about the consequences of decisions, listen to supporters, and wherever possible, modify those decisions so that we get to a better place for supporters. And I definitely think there are opportunities. I don't want to overblow that, but I think even what Carly's been talking about here, there must be opportunities. We've got to be creative and think about how do we help make this more attractive to local supporters, particularly youth. How do we make the progression for young fans living in the local vicinity of the stadium to feel it's their stadium, that they can be part of it and build that next generation from local fans as well. So I think there's got to be opportunities there. I think there are plenty of opportunities with the new stadium to really create that kind of vibrant community that we all want, that was very difficult to change. So, yeah, I mean, these 6 sort of highlighted areas, they're not our areas, they're what supporters have highlighted to us. But, I've got sympathy with all of these, certainly. I don't know whether you want me to talk them through at all or not.
I'd be really interested to know, because, we know that any fan group wants football to stay affordable. We know that we've been concerned forever about the funding and the debt at United, and all football supporters hate personal seat licenses. I would say that you've given quite a bit of latitude there, because you're just saying in season ticket areas and general admission areas, we all want a better atmosphere. We'd love to have fan ownership, but they've shut us out forever. And heritage and identity can be interpreted in so many different ways, and there can be so much bullshit around it that they can fob you off so easily that we've seen it, and even today I felt it with the affordable housing. I thought, yeah, all right, how long's that going to last? But what I would ask you to do, which of these areas are you most concerned about, and which are you most optimistic about, if you could pick one of each?
Well, optimistic, and that it might sound surprising, but atmosphere, I think there is an opportunity there, because I think we've seen where it's been done badly, and West Ham's the classic example, isn't it? And I think we flagged that right from the start, and I'm sure TRA have in particular. what was done wrong at West Ham. And they were obviously in a situation where they were presented with a stadium that was designed for athletics, essentially. But, we talked to the architects in the early stages, and they've absolutely bought into the ideas about steep stands, cheap seats, standing, close to the pitch, all the things that we think are important for atmosphere. I'll just comment on the affordability thing because it's a bit of a bugbear for me, but, the club talk about it as well. But I think it isn't exactly affordability, although, of course, there are definitely people who have been priced out. There's no doubt about that. And particularly, I think, in the local area immediately around the stadium that Carly was talking about, M32. I know people in that area who stopped going because they just had enough. But actually, for me, the affordability, and it's different for different kinds of supporters. A supporter who goes in hospitality doesn't identify exactly in the same way. Some do, and there are plenty of, hardcore fans who are in exec facilities, for example. But they don't link their identity to the price they're charged. And I think that they do in the traditional atmospheric ends of the stadium. And so if you charge the market price to those fans, that signals to that fan that the club doesn't value you as a supporter, it values you as a customer who is giving revenue. And so it kind of changes your identity. It changes your perceived identity with the club. And so that's the sort of argument that we've been trying to make, including to shareholders, Sir Jim Ratcliffe in particular, who probably started with a very different view that ticket revenue is just another revenue source. And I think I've already seen a movement in his opinion on that, and in the new executives that have taken over since Ineos came in, that they're appreciating that almost there's a business case for pricing tickets in a way that doesn't maximize revenue, but it optimizes it, because you balance what you get from the revenue from the tickets versus the identity that fans have that creates a culture and a vibrancy. And it's not just basic atmosphere. And I think there's more downside than upside. And what I would say is, what you really need is that you don't want customers who get on the back of the players as soon as they're performing badly, because that creates a fear of failure amongst the squad. They don't want to take risks. So there's almost a bigger downside potential if you don't have the right identity of people as fans in the stadium, where they just feel they're customers. And I think that, there's a good argument there to be made, and we need to win that argument to convince them that it's not worth chasing every quid in order to maximize that revenue. And there are better ways of doing it. And I think you can certainly do that. I mean, you touched on seat licenses. I don't think there's an issue with seat licenses in hospitality areas, particularly. It's part of a commercial decision. And as I understand it, if they do introduce seat licenses, it won't be compulsory. No one will be forced to take one. But obviously the fear is that it will be associated with certain things like new season ticket holders. It's a route into getting a ticket rather than going through the waiting list. Or if you want to pass on your ticket and, because you're ill or after bereavement, the seat license will create a portable season ticket, effectively, that can be passed on or sold on, even at a commercial value, from what I understand. Those are the sort of issues. And so the idea of putting seat licenses into general admission areas for season ticket holders, I think, is a very damaging one, and it will become divisive in our support base if they do that. So I think that's a battle that we've got to fight there. And of course, if they're modelling their funding, and it's going to depend on X number of fans taking out a seat license, and in the USA in particular, when they built stadia, it's been a core part of their funding model, is that the fans effectively commit to buy a seat license, and that funds the stadium. So I think that's going to be a difficult battle, but it's one that we need to fight hard on. The other areas, shareholders tend to prefer debt, because debt to them is cheaper because they're not giving away any of their ownership. And the argument we've made in the few situations where we've had an opportunity to speak to owners is that they should be custodians of the football club rather than shareholders seeking a profit. And if they are true to that identity as a custodian, they should be doing what's best for the football club. And what's best for the football club is to issue new shares and bring in new capital, which dilutes their shareholding if they don't take the shares themselves. But it doesn't cost the club anything. It brings new money in. Obviously, taking debt has to be funded. Interest payments have to be funded, and all that has to be set against revenues. That therefore makes the temptation to drive up ticket revenue and puts the pressure on the relationship between the fans and the club. So I think when we talk here about fan ownership, we're not talking about fans owning the whole football club by any means. But I think there is a similar argument that if you want to try and bring people together and get rid of the them and us, or at least reduce that sense of them and us, and we've had that particularly since the Glazer takeover, then having fans as co-shareholders in the club is a complete shift in the, that relationship. All these are really difficult things, I accept that, but I think that, we should be looking at what is the best outcome for the club and then let them make the arguments for why they want to go a different route if they choose to.
All right. Carly, what do you expect next, and any other final words?
I expect that we probably won't see a great amount happening for a while. If you look at, there was a graphic that was published as part of the stuff that came out today, which basically breaks down a bit of a timeline as to what we're going to expect to see over the coming years. Obviously, the actual building of the stadium is a very long-term project. We can expect to see some consultation coming in, but we're not going to see any sort of, real breaking of ground anytime soon. There's some stuff about the transport links, how they're going to, be upgraded and change. But I think there's still a long way to go in this process. This is, a 10-year process. It's not something that's going to happen in the next year or two. What we need to see from fans is that we need to get organised. And we know that this is coming. We would all love there to be some sort of if United sent out a text tomorrow and said to everyone, are you in favour of a new stadium? Yes or no? As Dunk said, it's not a referendum. That's not going to happen. Even if 99% of fans said no, I believe they would still go ahead with it because they've decided that they want this to happen. It's bigger than United now. It's not just about United Stadium. It's about the whole development area around it. It's about a huge, huge regeneration project now, not just a small part of that larger area being the stadium. So the wheels are in motion. It's going to happen whether we like it or not, and whether 99% of fans are against it or not, current season ticket holders or, general members. What has been said by fans from other clubs like West Ham, like Tottenham, like Everton is the advice to United fans has been, before you go into that process, you need to know what you want. Don't sort of wait until the consultation comes along and be continuing to argue between yourselves about whether you want it, whether you don't, what you don't want, and focusing on the negatives. When they come to you with that consultation, you have to be straight in there saying, this is what's non-negotiable for us. This is what's really important. We don't want personal seat licenses. We want there to be, rail seating at across all 3 levels behind the goals. We don't want hospitality in general admission areas right behind the goals, whatever it is, whatever our non-negotiables are. We need to have that ready so that we've got something to go to the club and say, this is what we want. This is, the direction that we want it to go in, and not being caught bickering between ourselves about, how consultation has happened or who made what decisions amongst the fan base or whether we should have opposed the stadium more. We need to be prepared for it. And I think as fans, we need to sort of start thinking these things through for ourselves and thinking on an individual and maybe like group basis with your mates. What is it that would stop you from going to Old Trafford? Is it a new stadium altogether? Or is it, if you weren't able to sit with your mates, therefore you want to make sure that the consultation piece captures that you need to be able to, when the ticketing comes in, you need to allow people to move in groups, or you need to allow rail seating in particular areas, or whatever it is that is going to make it feel more like home for you. We need to know that and be putting that messaging in straight off. So it's really good to see that Must, I think, are coming out with this stuff now and has that sort of little list of things that they want to push for. Because if we don't get organised and we don't start setting our stall out with our wants and hopes and needs, we're going to miss the boat on this, because the boat is sailing whether we're on board it or not, straight down the ship canal. So yeah, I think we're going to see the consultation stuff starting. Trafford Council have already started theirs. The club will start theirs soon. And we need to be in a position to go with it when it comes and make the situation that none of us, I think, really want to be in. But it's the situation that we're finding ourselves in. And I think we need to make the best of it that we can with the sosia that we currently have.
So just double quick then to finish off, we're in good hands though, aren't we? Because you know that, Dunk knows that, you were nodding along there, and there are others involved. Can people, or should people be doing something right now?
I mean, certainly, I mean, we're going to be talking to the club next week. We're going to present this first survey to them. I don't think there's anything that's going to completely shock them in there, but we want to talk about how that consultation is going to happen. And I think really important, I think, is to set out a kind of consultation timeline, because people want to know when certain types of issues are going to be, consulted on. And I think we should break it down, so the sort of things that Carly just talked about there, about a lot of existing season ticket holders will fear what's going to happen if I'm with my mates now, and where we're going to be in the new stadium. How's that process going to happen? And so I think having a timeline where we know when each of the thing is going to be talked about means we can prepare for it, we can consult on it, and we can kind of form a position, and as best as possible, get a united position across the fan base. And that makes a much more compelling argument to the club. But in the end, you've got to make it in a business argument, in effect. What is the value of taking supporters with you? What do we bring to the table for them to try and convince them? Because, we're not in a position of power. We're in a position of influence to a degree. And that level of influence depends on how good we are at consulting with supporters and really showing strong arguments that have good support across the fan base.
Sweet. Thank you both. No intro and no outro. Hopefully we dealt with a fair bit of stuff, and then we'll await the next steps and subsequent announcement. Cheers. Appreciate it.